Draft Deandre Ayton gets a sense of his future, more summer league talk, and roster compositions. Let's get to it on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, we got a lot to get to this show. We're going to talk some Deandre Ayton, some Dalen Terry, some Mathurin, some Christian Koloko, some of the usual suspects here. Then we're going to talk a little bit of the roster breakdown, what to look for this coming year, what to look for the year after that, and we'll kind of see where that takes us. But first, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that Deandre Ayton signed a contract with the Indiana Pacers. It was a 4-year, $133 million deal, which was promptly matched by the Phoenix Suns, which I don't know it should surprise people, but it was interesting with the manner in which this came about. First, this basically means that Deandre Ayton will at least be a Sun through January because they can't trade him now. Now, I think a lot of people were really surprised to see that Deandre Ayton might be coming back, especially with the way that last season ended. But I've always felt it was kind of this way if I'm the Phoenix Suns. Let's be honest here. Your Deandre Ayton is not David Robinson. He's not Shaquille O'Neal, but he's 23 years old. You can pencil him in at 17 points and 10 rebounds per, and that's better than a lot of what you're going to get from pretty much any centers out there. I would say at this point that he's probably a top 5 to 7 center in the league. And again, he's not a franchise cornerstone, but he's a really good third option. Now, what I would like to see from the Suns, assuming that Ayton is in this for the long haul, I would like to see the Suns actually utilize Ayton in the proper way. We've talked about this before, but Ayton can do things out there. He's a pretty fluid athlete. He can make some plays down low, but all too often it seems like the Phoenix Suns were just comfortable putting him in these kind of rim runner type positions where, but I can find somebody in the middle of the late first round that can do that. So what does that really accomplish? So it was a good move by the Suns, especially because you need somebody to pair with Devin Booker. The Kevin Durant thing is obviously still on the table, but you obviously need somebody to be able to pair with Devin Booker because Chris Paul is kind of at the stage in his career where I can't really count on you. I mean, you're 37 years old now. You're going to be 38. You had a really good year this past year, but once the Suns hit the playoffs, he was pretty much toast in that second round against the Dallas Mavericks. I would like to see his minutes scaled way back to something where it's like 40 minutes per game, or not 40 minutes per game, like 40 to 50 games per year, because I need you ready to go come postseason time. That's what I'd like to see at least. But back to Ayton, again, as disillusioned as some might be with the way the season ended, especially Monty Williams, it's hard to let a guy like Ayton walk, especially when you look at some of the absurd contracts that some of these players are signing. You know that he's probably 20 and 10 upside, and he's not going to get in trouble, and he can be probably your third best player for the next 10 years, and you can be good at that. You've still got to reshuffle your roster. I think you still got to get better at certain positions, but I'm happy that the Suns went ahead and did that with Deandre Ayton. Now, let's get to some more Summer League talk since it's now over, but we've started a lot with Mathurin, with Christian Koloko. We're going to talk a little Dalen Terry now. Terry yesterday put in his best game as an NBA Summer League pro. He put up 20 points, 8 rebounds. Again, big picture, and I realize that I'm kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth. I think Dalen can be the best pro out of this entire trio of U of A guys. Mainly because And Benedict Mathurin does too. So again, I don't want to act like he just has so many aspects that you can't teach. And he learns so quickly at what he needs to get better at. You remember, 2 games earlier, he looked lost out there. He had 6 points and 7 turnovers. And talking with his dad a little bit, he said, Dalen was pressing, but he was right back in the gym. It got to the point where the Chicago Bulls nearly had to kick him out of the gym and tell him to go home. You're getting that kind of gym rat in Dalen Terry, and that's what, if you're a Bulls fan, I think you're excited about. Again, this isn't going to pay off instantly. There's no doubt about that. There's just no way that it can because, again, he's a young guy. He's still very raw. But by the time Dalen Terry is 23 or 24 years old, you're not going to want to mess with Dalen Terry at all. He's going to be that kind of player that is, again, I don't think he's going to be an all-league type player. But if you were to tell me that he had Andre Iguodala type upside, I could certainly see that. Again, our guy Matt Muehlbach will always say that, the only difference is there's not quite the explosion with Dalen that there is with Andre Iguodala, but that's not a bad comparison. I dig that a great deal. And the other thing that's great about it is Dalen Terry's he talked about it before and it raised some eyebrows. I loved his quote, but when he said, I'm looking to compete against the best. I'm looking to go against the best players out there. I'd rather learn in the NBA than dominate in college. And now he's on a team where he's got DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. Dalen, I think you're going to be right on there to be able to ride on that track right there. All right. Benedict Mathurin, another guy, kind of goes without saying. He looks the part. And I've said this from day one, if I was drafting, I would have 100% picked him. Or at least on my big board, is the 4th best player. I like him more than Murray. I like him more than Ivy. I think that there's just not a lot not to like about Benedict Mathurin. Now, you could say that his defense should have been better. He's in college. He's a motivated kid. I have no doubt that when he does get to the NBA, well, he's there now, they're going to tell him the importance of defense. And you always hear people say, like, oh, the NBA, they don't care about defense. Well, they do. I mean, you have people that have made entire careers just based off defense. So if he can get that part just up to average, offensively, I don't really have many concerns. He can get to the basket. He can take threes. He can pull up. He can do a multitude of different things. So, and physically, I think that's what surprised few people too, is just how physically impressive he looked out there. And again, it shouldn't really impress anybody, or it shouldn't really surprise anybody, I think, at this point, mainly because he is he got much better between his freshman and sophomore year. I'm very interested to see what that jump could pertain to from what would be his sophomore to junior year then. Can he come back with even more ball handling? Can he come back with an even greater sense of court awareness? And he showed a great deal of improvement in both of those realms. So it's exciting to see what he can do. But if you were to tell me that there's an NBA All-Star position in his future, I could certainly see that. Again, great kid. Christian Koloko is a guy that I could kind of see going either way. I would doubt that he's going to play a ton this year on the Raptors, mainly because you've got a guy that I think kind of fits that role right now in Chris Boucher. But I think that's a little bit of the template there, in that you're that long, wiry shot blocker who you're going to have to learn how to shoot threes. Now, Boucher was shooting threes in college. But if you remember, Boucher got hurt. It took him a while. He bounced around, but he finally got a nice little role for himself in the NBA. Christian Koloko is not as good as Chris Boucher. But again, that's kind of where the template is, though. You've got a 7'1" big man, can move pretty well, pretty good at blocking shots. Sit behind him for a couple years and see where you're at. Koloko is also a player that I would caution, even though he's 21 or 22. You got to think of him more as about 18 or 19 because he's still young to basketball. I don't really get caught up in the age demographics. I only get caught up in the age situation when a guy looks like he's physically maxed. And Christian Koloko isn't close to looking physically maxed. This is a player that's going to look a lot different when he's 25 than where he is right now at 21, 22 years old. So I'm curious to see how all of these guys do perform. But again, Dalen Terry, real tip of the cap right there. I don't think anybody should be surprised. Benedict Mathurin, same way. Christian Coloco. But as you know, when you're at the U of A, you expect to see NBA draft picks out there, and that's an exciting thing to be able to watch right here. Okay, one thing, though, that you do need to know about, and if you ever wanted to bet on it, the one place that you would go is to the BetOnline Sportsbook. All right, let's talk a little bit about this. We're in the days of online gambling now. Why not go to a place that you can wholeheartedly trust? It's got the best deals. It's got everything up to date. You can get props. You can get futures. And again, the thing about it, I think so many people are worried about this. They're like, oh, well, I don't know what to do. It's all laid out there right for you with the BetOnline Sportsbook app. Check it out. Like I said, they have prop bets. If you wanted to bet on how many U of A guys were going to go in the first round, they probably had that bet on there. That's where you want to be at, though. Check it out, the BetOnline Sportsbook. Let's come back and let's talk a little bit of maybe some underlooked parts of this coming Arizona basketball team. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about that. We're talking about Arizona basketball and where it should be next year. And we've talked about a lot of the usual suspects. What do you want out of Azuolas Tubelis? What do you want out of Dalen Terry? Players like that. Kerr Kriisa. But let's talk about some other guys that are maybe a little bit overlooked in this entire situation and who are on campus right now. And that first one is Filip Borovichinen. 6'8", obviously from international recruit. There's some Instagram videos of him going out right now where he looks really good. It's very, very difficult to say. So I don't count on him for anything this year. But what did stick out to me a little bit was generally when these guys come in, you worry about their frame, you worry about their toughness. He physically looked pretty good. And I don't know that I necessarily thought that. I thought that you would see a player that was very timid, unsure of the American game, but he looks like he belongs out there. Now, if you've watched any of his videos, you know that skill-wise, he's fantastic. He can hit step-back threes. He can get to the hoop. He can pull up. He can do a lot of different things. I don't really see a huge role for him this year, not because he isn't good, but mainly because I just don't know where those minutes come from, because Pelle Larsson's going to play 30 minutes. Courtney Ramey's going to play 30 minutes. Kerr Kriisa is going to play 30. Then after that, you're bringing in a Gerald Henderson, who you're not bringing in to sit on the bench. He's going to play a ton. You've got, Kylan Boswell factors in there somewhere as well. You've got a lot of players, Adama Ball, who we're going to get to in just a second. So I don't know that there's necessarily a huge role for Philly B this year, but the one thing we know about Tommy Lloyd by this point is he knows international recruiting. So I'm going to believe that he's going to be good. And that's pretty much all that I need to say about that one. All right, Adama Ball, though, he really is the overlooked part of everything because he doesn't really factor into that core group of guys coming back because he didn't play a ton. Your Kerr Kriisas, your Azuolas Tubelis, your Pelle Larssons. He doesn't really factor into that equation, and he doesn't really factor into the newcomers like your Courtney Rameys, your Gerald Hendersons, your Kylan Boswells, because he's not a newcomer. But would it really shock anybody if he's averaging about 9 or 10 points per game? I know it certainly wouldn't shock me at all because he's physically, he's very young. Tommy Lloyd made that point time and time again up in Phoenix that, he's 18 and a half, where a lot of kids that are 18 and a half now in this new era are starting their senior year of high school, not their second year of college basketball. So he's young. He wants to learn. He stuck around, and he got better throughout the year. And I think Lloyd coined it best when he said, I might have had the training wheels on for him a little bit too long, but when he was ready, he came out there and he performed. Ball is going to get every opportunity to win a starting spot, every opportunity to be a 25, 28-minute per game guy because he's got that potential. It's just going to be if he's going to be able to reach it or not. But Tommy Lloyd has talked time and time again about the role that he sees Ball fitting in this year. And I think you got to remember, people, that it's not like anybody coming back for Arizona is Benn Mathurin or Dalen Terry, where you're like, all right, well, that's an All-American right there. You got solid players coming back. You got good players coming back. But, maybe outside of the point guard and the power forward spot, I don't know any spot that is absolutely etched and set in stone. And, again, Pelle Larsson is 90% going to start. But if Adama Ball comes in here and starts looking like an All-American immediately, I don't see why he wouldn't be in that equation as well. So we're certainly going to keep you up to date on what Adama Ball does, because I think he factors in very nicely for this coming season, and then really big in the 23-24 class, which we're going to get to here in just a second. We're going to take a quick break. Keep it locked on Wildcats. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now we've talked a lot about this, but we're going to talk more about it. 22-23, I think, is going to be a little bit of a bridge year for Arizona, and there's nothing wrong with that per se. Being that Arizona is going to be in the top 15 to 20 range, something like that. Not exactly sure where to find them, but they'll be somewhere in that area. Now, but the following year is where Arizona gets very, very interesting, because you could have a roster, and again, I don't know, this most likely won't be the case because this is college basketball, but you could have a roster where you could have Oumar Ballo, Henry Visar, Azuolas Tubelis, Dylan Anderson, Kwame Evans Jr., Philip Borovichinen, KJ Lewis, Kylan Boswell, Adama Ball, Pelle Larsson. I mean, that lineup is just loaded right there. Now, the one thing, and we talked about this before in a different another podcast, is that Kylan Boswell is a very important part to all of this, because he's really the only point guard to put in there who I think is a true point guard. Now, there's other guys that can man the position, and Tommy Lloyd's talked about that he doesn't necessarily worry about any of that stuff. But because of the offense, how free-flowing it is, about how he wants guys everywhere. But it always is nice to have a point guard. So if you look at that roster, really the only thing that you're lacking is maybe depth at that point guard spot, because you've got an abundance of wings, like we talked about, where you got KJ Lewis, you got Adama Ball, you've got Pelle Larsson, you've got Borovichinen. Then you look up front, we talked about it, you got 4 or 5 bigs in Ballo, Dylan Anderson, Visar, potentially Tubelis, Kwame Evans. So the only thing you really need is that point. So if you got that point guard, you're going to have that one pretty cinched up right there. But that would be the year that I would imagine that is going to be Tommy Lloyd, at least on paper, that's going to be his best team, because it's going to be there's going to be depth. It's going to be all Tommy Lloyd players for the most part, although, like I said, Kirk Risa or Azuolas Tubelis certainly could be there. But that, to me, is the national title team. I don't view this year coming up as a national title contender. I view it as a very good team that could possibly win the conference, but I think that they are limited in ways that the following year's team won't be limited, and this previous year's team wasn't limited either. But again, who knows really? But Tommy Lloyd, you got to tip your cap to him, because a lot of people were worried about that roster construction, how exactly the team would look. And what I think you're finding out right now is that he knows how to build a roster. He knows how to build a team. You just got to be able to trust Tommy Lloyd, and he's going to get this one done. Again, I look for this year's team to be a top 15 to 20 team, and then the year after that, that's when it's game on, national title type aspirations. It's kind of like where, it's kind of like a little bit where Sean Miller probably exceeded expectations in his second year by getting to the Elite Eight, and then that third year, which everybody was banking on, you lost Derek Williams, so that kind of set you back another year. But then by year 4, year 4 and 5, you're right there competing for championships. And I think that's the way that this Arizona situation is going to lay out with this year and this coming season. Okay, so again, Deandre Ayton gets paid. Dalen Terry steps up. A little bit of roster projections. Everybody, as you know, you have a great weekend out there. It's very hot, so like I said, but we will be back Monday, breaking everything down. Schuster will be back. We're going to talk some Arizona hoops, as always, some Arizona football. maybe what's going on. We'll maybe get to a few recruiting updates as well. But again, thank all of you out there for listening. It means a ton. And you have been listening to the Locked On Wildcats podcast.